Thanks for viewing and welcome back to the channel. If this is your first time, subscribe so you don't miss the latest uploads. Now let's get started.
The story begins with the protagonist of the story, the Baskerville family's hound, Vicar Van Baskerville's head on a guillotine. He was a loyal hound for the family, but he had been sentenced to the guillotine for false charges of associating with the Demon Clan. As he faced his death, he made a vow that if he were to live again, he would not live as a hound again. Afterwards, Vicar woke up in a cradle, disoriented and confused. He thought he might be in hell, as his surroundings were loud and his body felt heavy. It looked like Vicar was currently at a nursery, as there were many children there, all of them crying. Meanwhile, the Baskerville family patriarch, Hugo Le Baskerville, was inspecting the children's cradle. He roamed around the room and noticed children crying, and he dismissed them as insignificant, and even referred to them as trash. However, when he approached Vicar, he noticed that the child was quieter than the others. Hugo ordered for Vicar to be moved to the cradle of swords, and his attendant obeyed without question. As Vicar lay in the cradle, he looked up at Hugo with pure hatred in his eyes. He knew that Hugo was the main culprit behind his false charges and subsequent execution. Vicar realized that he had been regressed to when he was a baby, and that he had lived his past life as a hound for the Baskerville family. Vicar had been born into an illegitimate family and had received training in a poor environment. He had been raised to be a loyal hound, willing to do any dirty work that was required of him in order to make the Baskerville family the best of the 7 families. Vicar had loyal to the family and to Hugo because he had wanted to be acknowledged, but his loyalty had ultimately been repaid with a death sentence. The reason behind his execution was simple. He knew too much. Vicar swore that he would never live that life again and that he would take his revenge. However, with his newborn body, he knew that he couldn't do anything. Being moved to the cradle of swords was a good opportunity for Vicar to become stronger. Children born into the Baskerville family had to go through one trial called the Cradle of Swords. They were thrown into a maze of swords, and after going through that, they had to get to the Styx River to be examined for their talent. The Styx River was a legendary river that turned the bodies of children into iron. However, there was a limit to how many children it could affect, so being able to reach it faster was crucial. The only way to reach the Styx River first was to head straight out of the helix-shaped wall of blades, which was no easy feat. As Vicar crawled through the Cradle of Swords maze, he couldn't help but think about his past life. He had been ousted by his siblings and couldn't receive the effect he so desperately needed. But this time, things would be different. He was determined to monopolize the Styx River's blessing for as long as he could. As he made his way through the maze, he suddenly fell into the Styx River. The water seeped deep into his body and bones through his cuts, causing him intense pain. But he knew that he had to endure it for as long as he could. He couldn't let this opportunity slip away from him. Outside the maze, Vicar's attendants were shouting for him to come out. They were worried that he would die if he, but Vicar was determined to hold on for as long as possible. Meanwhile, Hugo watched with expectation in his eyes. He asked the Baskerville family head butler John Barrymore how much time had passed since Vicar had gotten in the river. Barrymore responded that around 7 minutes had passed. Hugo laughed and said that Vicar might die. The attendants looked at him with worry, requesting the patriarch Hugo to save Vicar. Hugo called out to Vicar, telling him that he could come out of the water now. But Vicar was too busy absorbing the sticks to pay attention. He thought to himself that he couldn't give up this opportunity so easily. He needed to absorb as much as he could until the very end. But then he started to fall down as water entered his mouth. Despite the danger he was in, Vicar knew that he needed to endure it. He kept repeating to himself to endure, endure, endure. It looked like Vicar was about to drown, but Hugo pulled him out of the water with a smug smile on his face. He commented on how greedy he was, even drinking the water from the Styx River. He then noticed that Vicar already had teeth, which surprised him. Hugo asked the head butler for Vicar's name, and he learned that it was Vicar Van Baskerville. Hugo smirked and said that a very greedy son had been born. Vicar, who was still somewhat conscious, thought to himself that he needed to use this time to sharpen his canines in secret. He was determined to rip his master's head off when the time came, and he would do it. The Baskerville family would disappear into history too by his own hands. Vicar Van Baskerville was born as the bastard son of Hugo the Baskerville, a renowned nobleman of his time. At the tender age of 8, it was apparent that Vicar possessed an extraordinary intelligence that far surpassed his peers. However, within the Baskerville family, he was considered nothing but ordinary, as he did not possess the direct lineage of the families of interest, eventually settling on the treacherous paths of assassination, espionage, and conquest. By the time he had reached the age of 20, he had already embarked on several missions that showcased his impressive skill set. But despite his achievements, Vicar still felt inadequate in comparison to those of direct lineage. At the age of 30, the gate leading to the demonic realm had opened, signaling the beginning of a terrifying invasion by the demon Vicar. Now a seasoned warrior stepped up to defend his realm, engaging in battles that saw him slaughter monsters left and right. For the next 5 years, Vicar endured through the era of destruction, fighting tirelessly to protect his people. And when the long war finally came to an end, it was the humans who emerged victorious. For his unwavering loyalty and bravery, Vicar was rewarded by the kingdom. However, the reward he received was not what he expected. Instead of being praised and celebrated for his efforts, he was met with defamatory accusations and false allegations. These unfounded claims led to Vicar's eventual execution by the guillotine's blade. Vicar sat up on his bed, realizing that he was in a nursery. He looked around and came to the realization that he had successfully absorbed the Styx River. This was a major achievement, and he knew that he now had a better starting point in life than before. Suddenly, he heard the door open and a maid entered the room. The maid seemed surprised and murmured to herself, saying why Madame had asked to place this sort of thing on the bed of the young Master Vicar. Vicar was surprised to hear the maid refer to Madame, as he never expected anyone in the Baskerville family to give him, a bastard, a present. The maid left after placing a box in Vicar's bed. As Vicar saw the box opening, he was shocked to see 2 bloody mambas coming out of it. He wondered if Madame had them to assassinate him. Vicar knew that there were only a few people in the Baskerville family who would be referred to as Madame. And whoever it was, she was probably trying to reduce competition. As the mambas hissed at Vicar, he realized that they could kill all of the babies in the nursery. However, Vicar caught both the mambas with his bare hands. Filled with hatred, he thought that he would bring the entire Baskerville family down with his own 2 hands. The next day, the people of Baskerville were shocked to find the child sleeping peacefully next to the dead vipers. All the nannies who had been on shift that night were executed after torture. But the reason for the viper's appearance remained unknown. Only the young hound Vicar knew the truth. 8 years later, Vicar was back in class, listening to his teacher discuss the levels of swordsmanship. The teacher explained that if one cannot yet imbue their sword with mana, they are considered a sword beginner. The next level is the sword expert, where one can infuse the blade with a little bit of mana. When the blade emits mana in liquid-like aura form, it is called sword graduate. Lastly, the level at which the aura is solid and the form can freely be changed is called Sword Master, which is the highest level of swordsmanship. Upon hearing that Sir Hugo, the strongest of the Baskervilles, was a sword master, all the students present exclaimed in surprise and astonishment. However, Vicar was lost in thought and felt the need to regain the power he had prior to his regression before the coming-of-age ceremony. The teacher noticed Vicar's distracted state and thought highly of him, knowing that he had earned a strong physique by diving in the Styx River for 7 minutes. The teacher believed that Vicar was much more talented than the other students and that the patriarch would be very happy to know about his progress. As Vicar was lost in thought about how many years he needed to kill Hugo, he didn't notice the triplets giving him an evil look. After class was over, they pushed him and started mocking him, calling him a garbage van, and talked about the rumors about him diving in the Styx River and strangling 2 vipers to death when he was just a baby. Vicar recognized the triplets as the ones who had stabbed him in the past when he was running away after the defamation. They were known as Hugo the Baskerville's Trident, and their names were Highborough the Baskerville, Middleborough the Baskerville, and Lowborough the Baskerville, all 9 years old. The triplets continued to taunt Vicar, telling him to stop lying and that they didn't like him. Vicar thought to himself that they were going to be a real pain in the ass in just 10 years and that it might be a good idea to put them in their place now. As Vicar stood before the triplets, one of them brandished a knife and taunted him with a rumor he had heard, that if you stayed in the Styx River for long enough, your body would become like steel, and you would be impervious to injury from blades. The other 2 triplets eagerly echoed their agreement, while the third gave the order for one of the others to hold Vicar still. The triplet caught Vicar from behind and covered his mouth with one and said, "I'll eat my hand if he can endure this for 3 minutes." Vicar was not afraid and even played along with this cruel game for a moment. As the triplet holding Vicar released him, he noticed blood on his hand and realized that his finger was missing. Vicar then spat out the triplet's finger from his mouth. The triplet was shocked and asked Vicar what he was doing. With an evil smile on his face, Vicar reminded the triplet of his promise to eat his own hand. Meanwhile, the other 2 triplets were trying to calm down the situation and suggested that they go to a priest to put the finger back. But Vicar was not interested in that and instead asked to let them go. The triplet then attacked Vicar with a knife, calling him a bastard and reminding him that they were a year older than him. Vicar did not dodge the attack and allowed the knife to stick into him, but to the triplet's surprise, it could not pierce his skin. Vicar twisted the triplets' hand and reminded them that they had forgotten that they were dealing with a Baskerville, where power and talent overcome age. With an evil look on his face, Vicar suggested that they continue playing until the end. Vicar suddenly punched the triplets, knocking him to the ground, while the other two watched in disbelief. The third triplet attacked Vicar in a fit of anger, but he quickly kicked him in the face, sending him crashing down. The room fell silent as the triplets lay there, battered and broken. Vicar stood over them, looking cold and unfeeling. He then told the triplets that they would get better with treatment, but he also made it clear that he wouldn't let them leave the room and they would have to live with the discomfort of their own bodies. However, he would be generous and allow one of them to leave. The triplets were surprised and relieved to hear this and asked which one could leave. Vicar picked up a knife and threw it in front of the triplets, telling them that they would have to decide for themselves who would leave the room. He then started to leave, but not before turning back and issuing a taunting remark saying that he can't wait long, so decide quickly. At least one of you should live right. The triplets looked at the knife and at each other, realizing that survival was their only option. They began to fight, each trying to grab the knife and gain the upper hand. The sounds of their struggle echoed through the room, and Vicar listened with satisfaction from outside. In the Patriarch's office, the head butler, John Barrymore, delivered some unsettling news to the Baskerville clan patriarch. Hugo Le Baskerville, the Moore clan had been causing trouble in the ruby mines, claiming it as their territory. However, Patriarch Hugo assured John that they would handle the matter when the Moore clan reached out to them. John then reported on the interim evaluation of the juvenile fortress and informed the Patriarch that Master Vicar had scored the highest on the written exam. The practical exam was scheduled in 5 days, and the Guardian Knights had vacated the premises in preparation. However, John hesitated before informing the Patriarch of a recent incident at the juvenile fortress. John informed the Patriarch that there had been a big fight amongst the young masters at the fortress. Patriarch Hugo was concerned and asked how many of them had died. Butler John informed Hugo that there were no casualties, but Master Highborough's teeth had been completely damaged, Master Middleborough's jaw had been smashed in, and Master Lowborough's left index finger had been amputated. While they had recovered their health since being treated, the psychological damage done to them seemed significant. Patriarch Hugo was taken aback and remarked that they wouldn't have fought amongst themselves since they were so close. John then revealed that there was some friction with another young master, an 8-year-old named Master Vicar, who had wounded the 3 young masters and who also had the highest scores on the written exam. After Patriarch Hugo expressed his concern about the incident at the juvenile fortress, he summoned Vicar to his office. Vicar arrived with a smile on his face and Patriarch Hugo commented on how much he had grown since they last met. Patriarch Hugo then brought up the issue of Vicar disabling the 9-year-old triplets in his senior class. Vicar responded that the brothers had received proper medical treatment. However, Patriarch Hugo pointed out that he was not talking about physical disabilities, but the disability of the heart. He explained how the incident had torn the brothers' relationship apart and asked Vicar if he thought what he did was wrong. To this, Vicar responded with a question of his own asking what did he do wrong. Patriarch Hugo pointed out that he had turned his brothers into a total mess. Vicar, with a confident look in his crimson eyes, replied he was stronger and how could the stronger person be wrong. Patriarch Hugo then revealed Vicar's brothers had forgiven him, yet he still didn't feel an ounce of guilt. Vicar seemed surprised by this news and asked they forgive me. Vicar suddenly recalled a memory before his regression. The youngest daughter of a family that was ruined by the Baskerville clan came to pay Hugo a visit. She had become a nun after many years and she forgave Hugo despite his clan being responsible for the ruin of her family. Vicar repeated the same line that forgiveness is an excuse made by the weak who cannot seek revenge due to their lack of strength. As Vicar talked about the importance of strength, Hugo showed his approval by nodding and his eyes glowing with agreement. He then turned to the head butler, Barrymore, and instructed him to allow Vicar to take any snack he wanted from the food storage, enough for him to carry on his own. Vicar expressed his gratitude by requesting chocolates. As Vicar was leaving with head butler, Hugo addressed him as his son, urging him to perform well on the upcoming evaluation and not to lose to the direct descendants. Vicar acknowledged the advice, but his face was filled with hatred. Vicar and head butler made their way to the storage room. The head butler began to inform him about the chocolate. He explained that it was the highest quality chocolate that the Moore clan had obtained with much difficulty, and that it was enjoyed by their gourmands. However, Vicar quickly interrupted him and stated that he didn't want anything that was processed. The head butler was taken aback by this and asked for clarification. Vicar then requested cacao beans, ones that had a rich aroma. The head butler was confused but complied and had the beans brought to Vikier. As Vikier put one of the beans in his mouth, the chef informed him that they were the bloody beans known for their rich aroma and that with just one bean, he could produce 100 liters of chocolate. The head butler watched as Vikier ate the bitter bean and thought to himself that Vikier must really love chocolate to eat something bitter on its own. And this was a good method to obtain more chocolate, as after being processed, he would have a huge amount of chocolate available. The chef asked Vikier if he wanted them to process the beans and send them to his room, but Vikier declined and said he would take them as is. The head butler was left wondering if Vikier just had peculiar tastes. Vikier had no interest in eating the chocolate, but he had a plan for the cacao beans. Vikier planned to use the beans in the upcoming practical exam in 5 days. Little did they know, a catastrophic event would soon occur, unlike anything that had ever happened before in the Baskerville clan's history. In this world, the Baskerville family is known as the Berserker family due to the intense training and evaluation that their children undergo from a young age. The training begins when the children are able to take their first steps, and they are immediately put through a rigorous test of their stamina. They must run up a steep mountain and are not allowed to lie down or rest on their stomachs except for allocated times. As if this wasn't enough, when it's time for them to sleep, they are required to sleep alongside a monster corpse. This is to help them adjust to tough environments and become resilient in the face of danger. These extreme practices are what make the Baskerville family feared and respected throughout the land. After this period of grueling training, the children reach the age of 8, and the real test begins. The young hounds, as they are called, must undergo a deadly evaluation. This is the defining moment that has earned the Baskerville family. This is the mountain known as the La Rouge Lenoir Mountain. It is filled with monsters, and it is here that the young hounds gather to undergo their evaluation. The instructor of the Baskerville family, Shadow Dog Pavlov van Baskerville, stood before the young masters and explained the rules of the test. They needed to survive for a month in the area and hunt large and strong monsters. He went on to explain that the points for being successful in surviving were 10 points, and if the young masters survived without becoming disabled, it was 30 points. If they failed other young masters and survived, it was 50 points. If they defeated a monster and survived, it was 70 points. And if they fulfilled all the above conditions, they would receive 90 points. Pavlov also told the young masters that if they stole the badge that was given to them from someone else, additional points would be given. However, if they died, they would receive 0 points. He emphasized that there were no 100 points and reminded them of Sir Hugo's lesson that he also cautioned against leaving the designated area, as La Rouge et Lenoir Mountain was a restricted area with many undiscovered things. He recommended that the young masters move within the given space where the monsters had already been subjugated. He informed them that during the exam, shadow dogs would be hiding and grading them. As the young masters waited for the start of the practical exam, some of them noticed Vikier and began discussing his past feats. Despite their comments, Vikier remained composed and thought about the La Rouge et Lenoir Mountain, which he had visited before. Meanwhile, the triplets standing near Vikier were visibly nervous, sweating with fear. Shadow Dog Pavlov addressed the young masters, wishing them good luck before the bell rang, signaling the start of the exam. As soon as the bell rang, all the young masters started running towards different parts of the mountain to occupy advantageous areas. One of the young masters had a plan and thought about going to a place he had seen in the last year's exam, hoping to gain an edge. The young master behind him thought he could not survive alone and decided to follow him, with the intention of taking it from him. Meanwhile, the triplets were arguing amongst themselves, each wanting to do things their own way and come out on top. Shadow Dog Pavlov observed as the exam began, knowing that it was important to keep casualties to a minimum. Although killing was not prohibited, it was discouraged, and any contestant who did kill would have points deducted. Pavlov and the other shadow dogs were determined to do their best to prevent any unnecessary deaths. One of the shadow dogs that was assigned to follow Vikier was surprised to see him heading towards a restricted area. He wondered where Vikier was going and if he was the rumored genius who had distinguished himself since childhood. The shadow dog was intrigued and looked forward to seeing the skills Vikier would display. Vikier approached a large tree and wondered if this was the right spot. He thought that the soft ground would be suitable for him to set up camp for a while. Vikier then considered taking a break, which left the shadow dog following him confused. While other participants were busy fighting each other for points or facing monsters, Vikier gathered wood and practiced with a wooden stick. Later on, he slept peacefully under the tree. The shadow dog, who had been watching Vikier, grew impatient and started to question his actions. He wondered how long it had been since Vikier had taken a break and observed that he spent most of his time digging holes, hunting for food, or collecting, the shadow dog started to doubt the rumors about Vikir's supposed genius, wondering if he was planning on hiding instead of actively participating in the exam. At last, the shadow dog decided to leave and find something interesting elsewhere. As soon as the shadow dog left, Vikir's face lit up with a smile. He was happy that he could finally relax and thought to himself that camping outside reminded him of the old days. Vikir recalled a conversation with his group mate about using cacao beans to make fish smell less fishy. He threw some bloody beans into the fire and remarked that the interfering shadow dog was finally gone and he had finished all his preparations. He wondered if he should start his hunt now. A few days later, Vikir entered the restricted area and recognized it from his scouting days. As he was roaming around, he noticed a burning smell and burnt tree roots. He knew that the habitat of the monster he was looking for was around there. Suddenly, he spotted burning stool and realized that he had found it. There was only one monster around there that produced the kind of dropping, a hellhound. The hellhound stood in front of Vikir with flame erupting from its mouth. The hellhound was a dog from hell that brought horrific disasters to those who encountered it. It had a risk rating of B+ and was 3 meters in size. Its sulfuric flames that came out of its mouth and eyes were extremely gaseous and could trigger sparks. If it bit someone, they could not survive. The living things used as firewood would burn and not go out until they completely disappeared. Vikir knew that he was in trouble when he saw the towering figure of the lookout monster that swallowed the hellfires of the oil world, the hellhound. The beast was known to be one of the most dangerous monsters in the land, and Vikir had barely survived his encounter with one when he was just 18 years old in his past life. Now, as an 8-year-old, Vikir knew that it would be impossible for him to defeat the hellhound alone. But he remembered a way to take on the beast that even a child could manage. As the hellhound lunged towards him, Vikir quickly dodged to the side, remembering the first weakness of hellhounds. They could only move in straight lines. They found it difficult to suddenly change directions. Vikir quickly dropped some water on the ground, and as the hellhound charged towards him, he shouted out the second weakness of lookout monsters. They were unable to cross water. Because of the water Vikir dropped, the hellhound took a longer route to reach Vikir, giving him more time to dodge. Vikir knew that even a shallow depth of water could slow them down significantly, exposing the weakness common to all canine monsters, opening their mouth while running. Vikir found himself in another life-threatening situation as the bloodthirsty hellhound attacked him. But Vikir was prepared, and he threw a bloody bean into the monster's mouth. After landing, the hellhound suddenly started to whimper in pain and become unable to move. Vikir explained that chocolate was poison to canines, and with the bloody bean's power to make 100 liters of chocolate with just one bean, it was obvious what it would do to a canine monster like the hellhound. He drew his sword and aimed for the hellhound's weak spot where the ribs were not present, the kidney. With a swift and decisive strike, Vikir pierced the hellhound's kidney, killing it easily. As he absorbed the energy called XP or karma from the defeated monster, Vikir felt his body getting stronger. He swung his sword and felt it becoming lighter, knowing that he was catching up to where he was before his regression before he even reached the age of 15. Vikir couldn't help but wonder what kind of expression Hugo would make when he brought back a monster with a risk rating of B+ as an 8-year-old child. Vikir stood there, ready to take the head of the hellhound he had just defeated, feeling confident in his abilities. He knew he had already secured first place in the practical test, and was eager to claim his reward, something he never would have dreamed of in his past life. But his moment of triumph was short-lived as a group of hellhounds approached him, likely seeking revenge for their fallen comrade. Vikir collected, already knowing the weaknesses of these creatures and how to defeat them. As the hellhounds drew nearer, Vikir took out his sword and prepared to take them on. He had plenty of bloody beans left and was ready to use them to his advantage. With a smirk on his face, he cut the dead hellhound's head and taunted the hellhounds, knowing they were no match for his skills and knowledge. He had already defeated one of their kind and was prepared to take them all down. The hellhound suddenly started whimpering, which immediately caught Vikir's attention. He couldn't believe that the fierce beasts were feeling scared of a mere 8-year-old's bloodthirst. Hellhounds would never submit to their prey even if they were to die, Vikir thought to himself, trying to figure out what could have caused the hellhounds to feel so uneasy. As Vikir turned around, he saw a monstrous creature with 3 heads standing before him. It was a Cerberus, the legendary 3-headed dog from Greek mythology. The creature was massive, measuring at least 7 meters in size, and Vikir knew that a Cerberus had a risk rating of A+. Vikir was bewildered as to what a Cerberus, which typically inhabited the 7th ridge of the La Rouge at Lenoir Mountain, was doing here. The Cerberus was known as the ultimate lookout monster, residing in a place where all the dead spirits were headed. Vikir noticed that the Cerberus was bleeding and had multiple arrows stuck in its body. He realized that someone might have been hunting it, and it had come all the way to this place being chased. This was his chance to kill and injure a plus-rank monster, and he decided to attack the Cerberus. Despite the Cerberus being a powerful and dangerous creature, Vikir had been hiding his true abilities as a sword expert and had already reached a high level of expertise. His body had been strengthened by the river Styx, and all the weapons he possessed were working well against the injured Cerberus. With his refined swordsmanship, which he had developed through wars with the demon clans, he successfully landed some hits on the Cerberus. Vikir thought that he could do it, as an injured Cerberus was doable. Vikir's attack on the Cerberus seemed to be working, and he thought he had a chance of defeating the injured plus-rank monster. However, in a moment of carelessness, Vikir let his guard down, allowing the Cerberus to strike back with its claws. The first attack broke Vikir's sword, and the second sent him flying through the air. The force of the Cerberus attack sent Vikir hurtling towards a tree trunk. With a sickening thud, he smashed into the tree trunk, and blood poured from his mouth. He recovers himself later, and he sees the monster again. He wonders if he has lost consciousness earlier. He is resting by a tree, and the monster walks towards him. He realizes that he has received a direct attack from the Cerberus, and he can feel the pain in his left arm. He even wonders if his left hand has been ripped off completely. He checks his hand, and luckily for him, his left hand hasn't been ripped off completely. It's only the case that the hand has been injured terribly. He knows that the Cerberus is actually injured, but he didn't expect that the monster will just stop at injuring his arm when he can pull it off. So he says that for him to stop at just that, then it must be the effect of the river Styx that he has dipped himself in. He screams in appreciation for the river, because that's the only reason he has an arm right now. The monster tries to attack him again, and he jumps away. He claims that his damage is still remaining, and he won't be able to survive a second hit if he takes a second hit. He knows that's a difficult voyage, but as an experienced hunter, he has to find the best way out of a situation like that. And the best possible decision he can opt in for is to run with his tail tucked between his legs. He knows that if it wasn't for the fact that the monster was actually injured, he would have been torn apart already. So he has to thank the barbarians' tribe that is over the mountain. As he runs, the monster chases him. He keeps running, having in mind that if he gets past the iron fence, he will be out of the restricted area. As long as he can get to that safe place, then you can call it his win. But if he gets caught before he gets there, it's obvious he is going to die. He keeps running as the monster angrily runs after him. Unfortunately, he even forgets the path where the iron gate is. He tries to find the iron gate, thinking that it should be somewhere around where he is. He eventually finds the gate, and he is just some steps towards his safe place. He hopes that he will be able to run a little further. He keeps running and encouraging himself that all he has to do is to go a little bit further until he gets there. He notices that the monster has almost caught up with him, but he refuses to get discouraged. He runs and eventually gets towards his place. He jumps into the place, and the monster stops by the way. He remains on the floor for a short while so he can get himself better. He has left a trap by the place he was staying in case of necessity, and the trap has caught the monster. He mockingly welcomes the Cerberus to the cradle of swords as the monster struggles with the beans he has kept there. He also couldn't imagine that he would have to use a trap that he had laid out to catch and fight the hellhounds to catch a Cerberus. Cerberus is also in the same species of cannon monsters as the hellhounds. The bloody bean essence that he had spread on the wooden spear that has caught the Cerberus will act as poison for the monster. After the monster struggles for a little while, especially in his sick state, he starts foaming, and the poison starts affecting him. Instead of dying, the monster screams in anger. Vikir knows that since it is a high-ranking demon, he wouldn't die instantly, so he throws a spear at the monster. After throwing the spear, he starts walking toward the monster. He counts each of his steps, so he carries the first step, the second step, the fourth, the fifth, and the sixth, and when he gets to the seventh step, the monster has given up. The monster dies just on his 7 steps, and he acknowledges that the rumors he has heard are true. He reveals that the wooden spear he has thrown at the monster is different from regular spears. It's a spear that is laced with the bloody mamba's venomous form that won't let his victim walk more than 7 steps once he has been bitten. He reveals that he has kept the venom when the mamba snakes have visited him as a kid and says it is a good thing that he has kept it. He can feel the energy of the Cerberus seeping into his body, and he is glad that, finally, all 3 heads in the Cerberus are dead. His issue now is how he will carry the monster back to the village. That is because the cause of the monster's death will be quite obvious. So many of the Guardian Knight who has seen him carve the wooden spear will be his witness if people do not believe him. He remembers that there is something else he must do. He knows that the Cerberus are gatekeepers that protect their territories, and the Cerberus must have been protecting its dungeon somewhere nearby. He says that a dungeon is a mysterious place that harbors treasure, and sometimes powerful monsters use them as their lair. He says that since their gatekeeper is gone, the dungeon is probably empty, and he is sure that by spreading the feces of the Cerberus, he will be able to avoid battling small monsters, so he takes some of the feces of the Cerberus. He thinks of the best way he can find the dungeon. He looks at his surrounding, and he finds dried soil, rotten leaves, and moist roots. He also sees footprints and drools. He plans that he will backtrack the footsteps of the monster till he finds the dungeon. He walks along the forest, tracking the footsteps, and he eventually sees the dungeon. He realizes that it is the dungeon Cerberus was guarding before his attack, and he recalls that he was also at that dungeon before his regression.
Will RMC survive this trial? What rewards and dangers await him in this mysterious cave? Find out on the next upload of Revenge of the Iron Swordsman. Also remember to like and subscribe to let us know to make more episodes like this, and comment below other manhwas or mangas you would be interested in. Once again, thanks for watching.